Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. As usual, we have another great guest that's hopefully going to offer a lot of insight into maybe some of your health concerns or questions. Today, I'm joined by Miss Adele Wimsett. She's in the UK, so joining us late enough in her time. So thank you for making this fit,
Pleasure.
Adele. She's a women's health practitioner specializing in the under-supported intersection of ADHD, perimenopause, and the female nervous system. And this is a conversation I've wanted to have for a while. I'll explain now in a second. But Adele focuses on the science behind hormones and the nervous system and helps women create awareness around that. Make sure that women have informed or information regarding what's happening from their central nervous system and how their brain is working as they transition through perimenopause, but also information around the conversations with HRT, which I think we'll touch on today, Adele. So, how are you
Mm.
doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Typically, I had a night last night when my child decided to have a nosebleed at 1:30 in the morning. So
Oh my
we're
God.
holding in, and hopefully my ADHD traits won't have me umming and ahhing too much during our
I
conversation.
Sleep is number one. This is like I
Yeah,
say to my clients, it's going to
yeah,
be on my headstone. Sleep is number one because
yeah,
if you don't have sleep, especially if you're a midlife woman with kids and a career, you cannot do anything else.
absolutely. Absolutely. We're on the same page.
So, I can't remember when I came across your Instagram page. I know my mentor is Dr. Michael Platt, and he follows you as well. So, and we'll discuss how that's relevant. But I came across one of your posts, and I was like, oh, this is something I complain about a lot is the fact that women, as usual, are not being heard. We're not being properly cared for. Women are going to their doctors experiencing issues of anxiety, inability to focus, overwhelm, sleep issues, automatically thinking because of what we've heard through mainstream that we have ADHD, and then we're getting a diagnosis of ADHD irresponsibly in midlife and perimenopause without the doctor actually wanting to look at what else it could be. And this is a lot of what your posts and your education is about, is helping people understand what's going on here. So let's jump into that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just having the title, I don't even like to call it a label, of ADHD as a diagnosis is such an emotive thing. There's so much emotion that comes up around it. And, my intersex particular niche is around perimenopause and ADHD, but I work with all women. And that's because the reason I look at perimenopause is because it's such a huge time of diagnoses for women. So I wanted to get really curious, well, why is that? What's going on here? Because as you said, lots of hormonal symptoms can be similar to ADHD traits. We can be much more emotionally reactive. We might become a bit more forgetful, which on the face of it can look like ADHD. But and then this creates this really quite harmful narrative that people saying, oh, everyone's got ADHD, and actually for ADHD to really be there, we need to go back through childhood experiences. You're going to find if a woman's got ADHD, she's likely to have something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, alongside that, which is an intense, debilitating reaction to perceived criticism or perception of doing something wrong. They're likely to have masked their way through looking very successful in inverted commas during our 20s and our 30s. And then we get into perimenopause and the lid comes off. So lots of women naturally start going, what is going on here? And the ADHD stuff can come up because it's very similar. So it's working with a practitioner to really support that woman to get the right diagnosis for the right plan of support, whatever that looks like. So I think it's just something people need to have conversations about. It's not about going, oh God, everyone's got ADHD. It's about saying, like, let's get really curious with it. Because as I've said to you before, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we have a medical system that doesn't see hormones doing anything outside of protecting the uterus. And
Mhm.
as we know, they're multi-systemic. And one of the massive things that they do within the context of this conversation is affect cognitive function, executive function, mood regulation, nervous system support. So course, these kind of traits and symptoms are going to show up as hormones shift. And so for me, that's the conversation. Let's talk about that. How can we empower women with this knowledge to make really informed decisions about how they navigate this season?
Mhm. So in a sense, you may have ADHD, but on the other hand, you may not. You may just have a lot of these hormonal shifts that are presenting with the same symptoms, which I mentioned to you. Dr. Platt wrote the book on adrenaline dominance.
Mm.
And a lot of his proposal in that book is like, well, adrenaline is obviously driving the feelings of anxiety, insomnia, overwhelm, the inability to focus, the different types of ADHD that he goes into, the creative side. Actually, recently, when I spoke to him, he had mentioned to me that he believes there is an element of adrenaline and autism as well.
Okay.
But all these feelings that a lot of us are experiencing, there's the adrenaline aspect that most conventional doctors are never, ever, ever, ever going to mention to you. Like they never, they might say, "Are you stressed?" But they'll never mention the actual hormones. And then on the
Mm.
other hand, as we are transitioning through midlife and perimenopause, now we've got the lower progesterone. So we're not protecting, we're not offsetting all
Yes,
these crazy hormones.
absolutely.
We've got this hormone that's supposed to make us feel calm and joyful and not want to kill everyone in sight, and it's almost gone.
Yeah.
And then we go into, again, conventional medicine, we present all these symptoms, and they're like, I think you have ADHD. Here's some Vyvanse for you to help you
Mm.
focus, or something like that. What about my hormones? No, no, it's not them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably most ADHD women's assessment process is a bit more lengthy and complex that they have to go through, that I would like to think is a like robust process by the time that diagnosis come. I think where I see a lot of it is women going, oh my gosh, I think I have this, because it's so similar to these hormone imbalances. And it's like, okay, well, let's unpick that. Let's get your hormones right and see what you're left with.
Mhm.
Like lots of women will come to me and say, do you think I should start ADHD medication? And I'm never going to answer that question because it's such a personal journey for individuals to go through. But I say, well, let's sort your hormones out, because what you don't want to be doing is taking ADHD meds when it's a hormone imbalance. And as you said, progesterone is a mood stabilizer and nervous system support. So when we hit 35, that's the hormone declining. I'm sure, like you, I analyze lots of hormone data on a daily basis. I'm looking at hormone testing of every single day through the cycle. Estrogen is fine in most women well into their late 40s. They don't need estrogen. It's progesterone that drops. So that nervous system isn't getting that buffering. It's not getting the GABA support. It's not getting allopregnanolone support. It's just not getting the buffering from the adrenaline and the cortisol. So of course, we're going to have these experiences. And I'd like to speak on what you said around adrenaline. It astounds me. My model in clinic is to look, and I'm sure yours is similar. Adrenaline and cortisol are the queen bees. They are the hormones that the body will always optimize and support and never let you run out of, right? The others are like bottom of the pecking order when it comes to being resourced. And it has such a profound effect on lots of conditions in the body and how we're just showing up in our energy patterns during the day. Yet it's the one hormone that gets absolutely no medical mention unless you're in a complete disease state like Addison's disease. But other than that, there's no conversation about these stress hormones that run the show. And that astounds me.
Yeah, and especially adrenaline. We hear so much about cortisol that it almost annoys me. Yes, it's an important stress hormone, but very few of us are discussing adrenaline and how, if a dinosaur does come in the back door, it is adrenaline that's going to go first and get you out the other door. It's not cortisol. Cortisol keeps you in the steady
Keep
stress,
you
but
there.
adrenaline is what's keeping you wired and like always looking over your
Mm,
shoulder. What's wrong? The impending doom, the butterflies
mm,
in your stomach. And
mm.
again, as much as cortisol is important, it's the conversation is very focused on cortisol, the same way the conversation is very focused on estrogen. What about these other two important hormones?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think there's just so much that isn't discussed. Like when we're talking about things like prolactin as well, that has a massive impact on all of these things. And I think, a few years ago, I longed for the day where hormones were coming into the conversation around neurodiversity, around emotional mental health. And now I'm really backtracking on that, because what is happening is, I can
Gone
only
in the wrong
assume well-meaning,
direction.
yeah. And very well-meaning influencers or practitioners pick up on something like estrogen sensitizes dopamine and serotonin. So then the message becomes, oh, everyone needs to have this. But what is missing, well, it also sensitizes glutamate and histamine, which are a disaster for your nervous system and mental health in lots of cases. So it's become really basic. And it's the same with, if you have ADHD, you're progesterone intolerant. I mean, nothing makes me madder than seeing that, because it's so incorrect and so factual. Factual. Say a word. That's the point of the day we're in. But we're looking at this progesterone messaging that I saw one person a few months ago who had a big following put out ADHD and progesterone intolerant. This blew up, and now I'm just seeing like ADHD women coaches regurgitating that like it's now become facts. And that really concerns me, because now ADHD women are seeing that and saying, oh gosh, I can't have that. And they're not
This is the
accessing it.
problem with these huge platforms with people with a
Yeah.
lot of followers that are just regurgitating and they don't actually know what they're talking about. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because now you're you're convincing women of something that's not true. I've spoken about
Mm.
this several times and I'm still annoyed about it. The Diary of a CEO podcast, as much as I enjoyed, if you remember back in maybe September, October, he did that women's
Yeah.
health podcast and it was split into
Yeah.
two. So overall, it was 6 hours. Completely overlooked progesterone. They mentioned it maybe 3 times in 6 hours with 14 million
Yeah.
subscribers alone on his channel, not to mention
Mm.
all
All
their
of theirs.
subscribers. I'm like, am I the only one seeing the problem in this? Like, this is not
Yeah.
accurate information.
See across the board, right? How many practitioners, and I came across your work through a podcast you did with Carol Peterson, who to me is just like the
Oh,
queen when it comes to progesterone. That's who I learned everything from. And the coming across her work, and Katarina Dalton's and Geraldine Pryor's and Ray Peat's and Michael Platt's, all this work, and saying this is so powerful, yet it doesn't make it out in the mainstream narrative. It's this estrogen obsession, and estrogen comes with significant physical risk. If we could go, oh, up your estrogen, up your estrogen. No, are you trying to use estrogen to treat a progesterone deficiency? And that seems to be what I see, this standard, outdated medical approach to obsessing over estrogen, because they have not been trained in progesterone. And when you see big influencers like that who have an opportunity to raise awareness, not really giving it more than a side note, that's so disappointing,
yeah,
because it's a
yeah.
massive opportunity.
That side note being, well, progesterone is important too. That's as
Yeah,
far as it goes. Oh yeah, let's not bring.
yeah.
But you know, the really frustrating part to me is again, not only that these people have big platforms, but now we're seeing, and I don't know if I think it was probably on mainstream media where you are over like maybe a week ago or so, all the headlines. There's now a shortage of estrogen patches. Did you see that? There's a, oh, I wonder why that is. Could that be because you took the black label warning off it? Even though the WHO still has estrogen listed as a carcinogen. And I know there's all different forms of estrogen and metabolites and phases and all, but maybe the black label warning was there for a reason, not just the Women's Health Initiative. So my concern is that they took the black label warning off it to give the practitioners the ability to recommend it even more and women be more open to it, because women being of the mindset, well, if the FDA says it's okay now, then give me all the estrogen, and that's what's happened. And now we have the proof in the pudding. Now we have a shortage because all these women ran to their doctors for estrogen because the FDA says it's okay, and they're not exactly the most trustworthy people either. But
Let's get on that soapbox. And I think the misinformation around cancer risk with HRT is like a poison that has completely messed with women's accessibility to healthful hormones like progesterone. Because one of the things that I hear all the time is women go and say, I would really like to increase my progesterone. Not even wildly, maybe like daring to go to 300 or 400, which to us in our clinic is still quite a low dose, right? So, wanting to increase that and being told, no, you can't because it causes breast cancer. That's a lie.
Or
That
you
that
don't
is
need it because you don't have a uterus. Why would you need
yeah.
that?
I mean,
Are
that
you
to me is
crazy?
abhorrent. If
Yeah.
there is one piece of evidence, just one that you needed to pick to show how I would be cross if I was a doctor who had paid all that money to train and no one had told me about a woman's body and what the hormones do. I'd be cross about that. Why did no one tell me this? Because saying to a woman who's had a hysterectomy, you don't need progesterone, shows me that you were not trained on women's hormones. When you look at progesterone protecting your breast health, studies show time and again progesterone protects breast health or has a neutral response in that it doesn't do anything. But the synthetic progestins, which I'm really happy to prescribe you. Like hand them out like sweeties, right? Let's put a marina coil in you. Give you the pill. Um, or the progestin coil, let's put that in you. That's where there's a risk with breast cancer. But because they call these synthetic progestins progesterone, when a woman asks for body identical progesterone, she's often told no because of the breast cancer risk. And that's factually incorrect.
Hmm.
So it's a mess. And we're unpicking all this, and this is the world that we're in. Imagine you being a woman who's completely overwhelmed with symptoms, exhausted from advocating for herself. She's found the golden nugget to ask for, and then is told that.
Hmm. Very
We're doing
discouraging.
with yeah, such a disservice.
I have women crying to me all the time, just like literally, not just metaphorically, like crying that I'm so discouraged. I was just at my doctor. He won't listen to me. He won't help me. And like to a doctor, that's a few minutes of their day where a woman's saying she's struggling. To a woman, this is her life and she doesn't know how she's going to get through the next 24 hours or the day after, or how long is this going to last, and what
Yeah.
what impact is that then having on her family life, her marriage, her career. But again, to the doctor, he doesn't care. He's got another patient in a few minutes. Like, it's very hard to find a doctor that actually cares nowadays. And I'm not going to tar Ireland and England with the same brush, although I'm not too well informed on the NHS. But in Ireland, my doctor did care. But in Canada, it's hard to find a doctor here that actually
Yeah.
genuinely cares and wants to help you.
An interesting conversation because I do think we're in a point in I can speak for the UK, a point of change in that people like myself, there's been a couple of us with big Facebook group communities and sort of some platforms with space where we and community where we've been pushing the progesterone conversation for several years now, like looking at higher dosing, looking at different types of dosing, like the cream, and bringing this together in a really individualized, bespoke way that just is not considered on the NHS. So we've been beating this drum for a while now. And as a result of that, women have got curious with their progesterone dose and starting to see amazing results in lots of cases with that. Then, of course, they're going to their GP and saying, this is what is working for me. My capacity is increased. My mood's a lot better. I'm sleeping at night. Things are huge. My anxiety's gone. My mood's regulated. These are massive things that affect your quality of life. You deal with that with a really safe product, and then they're being met with no, we can't. It's not in nice guidelines. It's not within the guidelines. But
Or,
you're
oh my
also
God, you shouldn't be doing that. That's dangerous. I've heard women being told that.
yeah. Absolutely, but there's no grounds or evidence of that at all. What's your evidence saying that's dangerous? And then again, it usually comes back to the cancer discussion. But they're also at a point where I think it's the guidelines that are so out of date that they're then restricted. So even if there was, one of the prescribers who is aware at least of this and wants to get curious and says, okay, I'm really interested in this, but then they're restricted, they're frightened, which I get because my dose, for example, of progesterone is about 1200 mg in a 24-hour period. That's vaginal, that's oral, that's cream. So that's
That's a
way
lot.
off what you. But for me, That's my sweet spot. That is where I feel really good. And we can go a lot higher than that for women on an individual basis, right? But no one would prescribe me that because it's so off license, and it would make them feel vulnerable that if something happened, they've got no grounds to come back to. So I get that side of it as well. But what that means is women are just left in this limbo that if they can't afford to fund it privately, and
Mhm.
it's not cheap, to have these doses, where does that leave them? And with women, getting in from different countries and hoping it gets through customs. I mean, how ridiculous is that? This just want a good night's sleep.
I
Why are we
know.
having to go through this?
I know it's crazy. Going through customs, having to pay customs, having to pay the shipping fees. In some cases, it gets confiscated. Then you have to pay for the item itself. Then, how much do I order so I can save money in the future on shipping and customs? Who is who's the best company to get it from? All this stuff that we shouldn't have to think about, and especially the Canadian dollar is awful right now. So it's like in a numbers perspective, it's really expensive.
It's not sustainable. And then again, my background was working in the public sector. So I've got like a really strong inner social worker where I feel like, why is this? If you've got the money, you can navigate hormone deficiencies really with some ease. You're going to have to go through what I call the dosing dance, which can be a bit tricky of getting the right dose, the right type for your unique physiology, but it's accessible, whereas it's not for lots of women who could do really well. And I often think about the social cost of deficiencies of progesterone. How many women postnatally would benefit from the support of progesterone? That impact. How many mothers on the edge where their children might be under children's services could support with some regulation? I just think how many women are leaving their jobs and their work at the peak of their career, the peak of their training, the peak of their experience, because they're not being properly supported. And so there's a huge cost, I think, to our societies for something that's really quite simple and safe that could be explored. And that to me is crazy.
Well, the progesterone use in postpartum depression is sinful. That's not the first line of action. A woman comes into your office, she's had a baby a few weeks ago, she's really struggling and mentally, emotionally and mentally. Let's try progesterone first. That should be the first line of
Yeah,
action. And also, how
absolutely.
can we get you some help with the baby? Is there someone that can
Mm.
take the baby for a few hours so you can rest or something like that? So that should be our first point of call. But the societal aspect really concerns me because our teenagers and young adults are struggling, and even children, younger children, are struggling more than they ever had with their own mental health and abilities to navigate society. And I would propose that part of that is because the family home is already challenged because we have these mothers that can't operate at their full capacity because the demands we have on us right now between society and
Absolutely.
having a career. Okay, that's fine as long as you have the proper support tools. If you don't, now we've got angry mothers, we've got distant mothers, we've got women maybe using wine to get through their days. Not that the children are getting neglected, but they're not getting a whole mother because the mother is just trying to survive the day. And this that concerns me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I actually had a client last week who was based in the States, and and I haven't validated this, but she sounded very sincere about it, and that you can get for postnatal depression, you can get a progesterone drip for 3 days, but it's $40,000, and it's like, how is that? But the fact that that conversation was even happening around progesterone postnatally,
They
and this is where I
know.
push
Hmm.
that I'm pushing back against this narrative that ADHD women are progesterone intolerant. There's standard, like that's it. You've got ADHD, you're progesterone intolerant. But when ADHD women are pregnant, there is a consistent experience for most of us that when we were pregnant, our traits go. Okay, there is like, oh my God, you'll see ADHD and go, oh, I felt amazing. When I was actually pregnant, they're like, oh,
I
I felt
loved
so
being
good. I felt
pregnant.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the progesterone,
Hmm.
right? So you cannot have these two narratives they're not biologically possible that these two things exist. You have ADHD, so you're progesterone intolerant, but you felt amazing when you were pregnant. Those two things can't be true. right? It's just what's the dose that you're having? What's the type that you're having? That's what needs proper exploration if that's what you want. But certainly, we know that postnatally ADHD women, that's a really vulnerable time for us. We're much more likely to get postnatal depression. And no wonder we've given birth to that placenta that's been pumping out tons and tons of progesterone in our systems for months. We give birth to it, it's like, whoa,
Hmm.
no wonder we're more likely
Unless
to have postnatal depression.
unless they try to argue, well, it's not the progesterone, maybe it's the oxytocin from being pregnant or something like that.
Conversations that I've had with leads on the progesterone are like, that is what is happening,
It would
and I'm
make sense.
sure there's a mix. Yeah, I'm sure there's a mix of other things in there as well. But to me, there's still this very high progesterone. So if ADHD women were automatically progesterone intolerant, all of us would need psychiatric support whilst we were pregnant. The opposite happens.
Well, ADHD or
Mm.
not, the opposite generally happens. But that 40,000 IV drip, that's insane. That's like a down payment on a house. And so one, that tells me they know progesterone is helpful postpartum. Otherwise, why would they be offering this? Why are they making it so expensive when you could just go to one of these hormone sites and buy progesterone cream
Very
for
cream.
$50? It's still
Yeah.
going to go
Yeah.
systemic straight into the bloodstream, and you've saved yourself $39,950.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Don't know this. I mean, had I not stumbled across the work of my dear friend Jill Chilmesky, who then led me to Carol, who then led me to Dr. Phyllis Bronson and opened up this entire world of emotional and mental health being supported by hormones. I stumbled across that by a manner of synchronicities. That isn't most people's experience. How many women really know that progesterone cream exists and how to use that to support their emotional mental well-being? How many women really know that? It might be in our worlds because it's our bread and butter and it's what we teach our women, but I'm seeing a pinprick of
oh yeah.
women compared to how many could be supported by it. So I wish I had known that I could get progesterone cream postnatally, just be able to have that there just in case I needed it.
Yeah, I know from what from an inside point of view where we are, it looks like a lot of people know, especially when you look at like different Facebook groups, the estrogen dominance group and whatnot, you're like a lot
Yeah,
of people know. It's still only 1%. It's
yeah.
still a very small percentage, and there's still so many other voices again that just so happen to be louder than us because they have bigger platforms, they're more famous, maybe they're funded
Mm.
by big pharma or the medical industry. So we're not going to stop shouting from the rooftops, but at the same
Absolutely not.
time, um, sometimes it can be discouraging because you're like, this feels like an uphill battle.
Does. And I think that is where, for us as practitioners, it's really important to find our people because, so many times I've had sessions with women where we've really held their nervous systems. My job's not to tell people to take progesterone. That's not my job. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not a prescriber. That's not my job. A massive part of my role is to create a safe space to educate and empower women to make informed choices for themselves so they can go out and work with the right prescribers or the right people to get that progesterone if that's what they want to do. But I think that sometimes they're coming so traumatized from seeing these misinformed posts. So we share the information, we unpick it, they feel really inspired, really ready to advocate for themselves. And then they see another post or they go in a forum where someone's saying something negative and they're straight back into like, oh, I don't
What
know what to do now. I don't, and that is so hard. And I've actually reached a point now with women who are working with me on packages where I say, just for the time that we're together, my invitation is that you stop being on the forums. Stop the forums, stop the podcast, stop the like just for this time. You can come back to it all. But what is happening, and I'm sure you're seeing this, is that women are intellectualizing their symptoms as the safe parent, right? Because we're dealing with a medical system that doesn't understand our bodies. So we're like, okay, where are the answers? And we have so much information, which is amazing, but we're not meant to be our own endocrinologist, our own geneticist, our own biochemist. We're not meant to hold all that information. So we go down the rabbit holes, we get it all, and then we're completely overwhelmed to go into paralysis. Or we're spending loads on testing that we don't really understand, or it's chucking loads of supplements at something that, like, what does your body even need them? And is your nervous system processing them? And is your gut absorbing them? And all these things in a desperate bid to feel better. And I am really passionate about simplifying things. And let's stabilize you first before we optimize. Because women come to me with this backpack of genetics. I've got an MTHFR gene issue and I've got a histamine issue and we need to do my gut. Yes, all of that is true. But until we regulate your nervous system, until we regulate your blood sugar, until we optimize progesterone, you're pushing a rock up a mountain trying to do those things. You don't have the capacity to do a gut elimination diet, for example. Let's get the body thing stable and safe. And I think a lot of healing occurs just by doing that. Circadian rhythm. Get some daylight before you look at your phone. It's these things that can be quite simple, not always easy, that can have quite a profound impact on a woman's experience. It doesn't need to be a big complex protocol all the time.
Yeah, it's as you're saying that, I know many women, but one woman lately, and I don't know what test on the planet she has not paid for.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can understand your desperation, but what are you trying to achieve here? You need to
Yeah.
optimize, like you said, your sleep circadian rhythm. You need to get the nutrition and blood sugars done. And most of the time, that fixes half of the issues. You know, and I did say to someone the other day, she said, oh, I have this polymorphism and this genetic expression, this, that, and the other. What should I do? High risk for cardiovascular disease. And I was like, one, most of us are high risk for cardiovascular disease, all the stress you have. You don't need a polymorphism to cause that. And I said, do you know how many people who have these genetic predispositions and polymorphisms that have never got tested and they don't
Yeah.
have a stroke? Like sometimes I think this whole testing thing is overrated and can cause more
Absolutely.
problems than others.
I
And
agree. I would say in the last year, the wealth of information women are turning up with, and it hasn't served them. They are the most frazzled, exhausted, nervous system dysregulation that I have seen in the history of me doing this, of this work. There's a shift. And I think it's they see someone on social media talking about the MTHFR gene. Right, I'm going to get the genetic test for that. And then it's just this overwhelm of information of like, where do I even start? And we have access to all these tests that cost so much money. But if you're not getting the basics right, why are you looking at this? Let's get the basics right and then see how you feel. And maybe value in adding some of these in. But I would always say, come back. What energy is fueling your desire to have this test or work with this practitioner? And if it's anxiety and health fear, and that is pushing and leading, that is your nervous system feeling unsafe. If you're coming from a place of curiosity, where you might go, do you know what? This year, I'm going to do a test on my my nutrient genetics, and I'm going to get that test. I'm going to get curious with it, and then I'm going to spend the next 6 months with it, finding what I need, optimizing my supplementation. But when we get such genetic tests with all the things in it and check all this up, and it's just too much. And I think we just have to give women permission to just simplify and get the basics right again.
well, I think this is the problem, though, isn't it? With the advent of social media and all the different influencers, these sciencey topics like COMT genes and all
Yeah.
the different phases of detoxification, they can be helpful, but at the same time, these are sciencey terms that the average person
Mm.
does not understand. And when they try to, it causes more overwhelm. And then our natural instinct, especially for women, is to fix it. I have to fix it. Um, and we're overlooking the basics, that we're not sleeping, we're not eating well, we're not just taking care of ourselves.
Resting, just resting.
Yeah.
How many women feel they can take guilt-free, non-negotiable rest and just do nothing for the sake of doing nothing? You
It was
know,
so
that,
hard, so
yeah.
hard. Because so hard. I had this conversation with a woman, and her central nervous system is destroyed the other day from years of trauma, stress, kids with disabilities,
Mm,
divorce, the whole lot. And to take a day off and just sit down and rest, she had an immense amount of guilt. Like she wasn't doing anything she should be. She's not showing up. She felt very uncomfortable in her body, like fidgeting, twitching. I need to do something. But she knew in her head that she needed to
mm.
rest. And it was just this clash of the titans in her
Yeah,
body. And
I
it's so
absolutely
hard
get
for
that.
women.
I get that, you know, and again, this is something that I see with ADHD women. There's a driver inside that you can't switch off. So you go, just rest. And it's like, I can't. And it's actually more stressful to try and stop doing the thing than just get it done for us. But I think, you know, I understand that like guilt because that used to be me. And one of the best things I've given myself in perimenopause is permission to have a nap. I never slept in the day, you know, but like today I said to you, I was up, life was life in, I've got children. That happened at 1:30 this morning. Nosebleeds were up, getting back to sleep, disrupted day, clear my diary. And I sat on my sofa. I did what I felt like I wanted to do. I had guilt-free nap time, half an hour's nap. I would never have done that 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to. I'd have felt too anxious and too like, oh, no, no, I can't. Too much to do. I'll just get this done. I'll just get this done.
Hmm. Well, we could talk for ages, but let's jump into the study, the perfect storm,
Yeah.
the ADHD one, because this is where we are right
Yeah.
now. It's very interesting because Dr. Geraldine Pryor wrote the book, well, partially wrote the book, The Perfect Storm, but you did a study on this. So,
I did
yeah,
not know that.
yeah.
Kidding. Oh my gosh. Thank
Oh,
you for telling me that.
it's the estrogen storm season. So pretty cool.
Ah,
But you should read
amazing.
it.
Oh, I will do now. I've seen that. Thank you. Yeah, so this came about because I was very cross about the lack of research into women generally, but particularly ADHD and hormones for my work. And then perimenopause. Why is this lid coming off in perimenopause where there's so much diagnosis? We know this, but no one's researching it. So instead of moaning and complaining about it, I did something about it. And it was a small cohort of women, and it evidenced the perfect storm is what happens when the lid comes off is for me defines the progesterone declines, out goes the mood stabilization, nervous system buffering we've spoken about. Estrogen then dominates, not because we're producing too much, but because there isn't the sufficient opposing progesterone to keep her in check. That estrogen is then feeding histamine and feeding the glutamate. That is all going to have a significantly negative effect on your mood and your traits. So my hypothesis very much is it's progesterone we need to look at that season of life when women are saying, oh my gosh, I think I've got ADHD. This is what's happening. Why is it being revealed? If there's ADHD there, why is it being revealed at this point? And to me, it makes perfect sense. It's the progesterone. So that's what I wrote my paper on. Um, to evidence that. So we stop this obsession with estrogen. Oh, we need to put more estrogen because putting more estrogen into that kind of terrain is not going to help women.
It's good. And but to explain, like, I can give my explanation, but why do you think when women then are given just estrogen alone, which even Dr. Rosensweet I spoke to the other day, literally in his words, I quote, said that is dangerous to do
Yes.
that. They're finding relief. They feel better. Now, I have my theory on why they feel better, but why do you think it is?
In my view, through an ADHD lens, we're looking at that sensitization of dopamine and serotonin, right? So there could be that there is that aspect there. But for me, I'm not, and maybe it's the women that I see in my community, is I don't tend to see that. I don't tend to see women coming in on estrogen and feeling better. I see the opposite, but that may be because of the work I do and what comes through. What
A
would you
lot of
say?
Well, a lot of the women that I work with, well, they work with me because they know my opinion on it. But in the external community, like where I live in the local Facebook groups and all, I do see a lot of comments on just estrogen given in isolation. And oh my God, it was a great game changer for me. And I feel so much better. And my argument is, well, they've given you so much estrogen now that they've stabilized the estrogen fluctuations, which were causing your symptoms.
Yeah.
So now you've just
A
leveled
consistent
out.
dose. Mm.
But we're right now in the present, we're seeing you feel better because, again, we've stabilized the hormones. You're not getting more progesterone. You're
Mm.
adding to your estrogen load. So even though you feel okay now, how are you going to feel in 6 months or 6 years?
Mm.
What are we looking at down the
Mm.
line? Like this, to me, I don't want to say that's problematic. That is scary. You are doing something that's very high risk.
Yeah. I mean, when I tend to see that narrative is when women are given too low a dose of progesterone in the luteal phase, and they'll say, "I feel really good when I'm just on the estrogen in my follicular phase, and then I introduce the progesterone, and I don't like how I feel," and so the progesterone gets blamed. But what we see in 99% of cases is the progesterone was insufficient to the amount of estrogen. So what happens is they then get told, "Oh, up your estrogen." So you're on 4 pumps, 5 pumps, even like 6 pumps, going up to these high doses of estrogen, trying to feel better. And it's the progesterone that is the issue.
There, as Carol terms it, the estrogen kickback is happening
Yes.
where the progesterone is stimulating the estrogen and we're getting these negative symptoms. And then that really annoys me when people say, oh, but I have progesterone intolerance. I'm like, that's not even a recognized term. There's no literature that says there is progesterone intolerance. So maybe progesterone resistance, which I would argue is pretty rare, but most of the
Mm.
time, it's either going to be estrogen or adrenaline kickback, and you need a lot more, but also tells us that your problems were bigger than you initially thought they were.
Yes. And this is something, I mean, whenever I post about progesterone intolerance, it is the most triggering. The reactions that people have in comments show like the level of dysregulation, anger, trauma. And I get it. If you have had a negative experience
Oh, yeah.
with it, I understand that. But what makes me frustrated is that it's often just this, oh, you must be progesterone intolerant. And there's so many things. I see it when they've had a negative reaction to a synthetic progestin that they've been told is progesterone, told, oh, you're progesterone intolerant. Well, that wasn't even progesterone, so is it? Or when that like the dose is incorrect in that phase, or what is going on foundationally, what's happening with histamine here, what's happening with your liver, what other aspects, what nutrient deficiencies are there, can your body even process this properly? There are so many things, but because people are, whoever the person is saying to them, oh, you're progesterone intolerant, that then makes them go, well, that's it, I can never touch any of this again, and they're then denied access to it. Whereas more often than not, when you work with someone who really understands it, that's not the case at all. But there's so few people who do. I'm so fortunate to have an incredible prescriber that I run my clinic with. He's amazing when it comes to progesterone. He's worked with Carol, Dr. Rosensweet. He's amazing. But he's few and far between, people like him, right? So we have all these women who, understandably, they've been told, oh, I feel awful in my luteal phase. Well, that's when progesterone rises. So it must be the progesterone. Well, no, you're making lots of assumptions there. If you're making an assumption, one, that you've ovulated at all, how do you know you've ovulated? Just because you're having a period regularly doesn't mean you've ovulated. And two, you're making an assumption that you're producing enough progesterone to keep that estrogen in check.
Hmm.
That does not that progesterone that in like where progesterone should rise as a result of ovulation, but it doesn't mean it has. And when I analyze, I use Mirror in my clinic so I can see day-to-day testing and those ratios. And time and again, women with PMT, PMDD, there is insufficient progesterone in the luteal phase. It's not the progesterone, like these lovely high levels of progesterone, they're getting these awful symptoms. There's insufficient. And that is a pattern I see over and over again. But this narrative is, I feel awful in my luteal phase, therefore it must be progesterone.
So many assumptions based on those generic graphs that have been shared for decades and decades
Mm.
now. But I was just looking at your Instagram and you do have a great post. You started progesterone, you felt worse, and then are you really progesterone intolerant? So people should go check them out to go into more detail. One thing while we're here, you did another post, but I can't seem to find it. I did read it the other day and I gave it a like, but you were discussing the different forms of progesterone and how they influence
Mm,
us differently. You want to just touch on that because
yeah,
this is so confusing for women, and some women
yeah.
feel way better on creams and topical applications. Some women are better vaginal, some women orally. Yeah,
Well, the beauty of us as women, right? This is why I will never get bored of my job because no woman is ever going to be the same in front of me. There is no magic formula. And I think we have this cultural illusion that we slap a patch on our butt and skip off into the sunset with HRT. That is not what happens. Okay. It's not a golden ticket. It takes time because I can sit in front of a woman and I know very quickly whether she needs progesterone. Okay. I can see it. I know, we know the symptoms. I know. I don't need to question that. What I don't know is what type, what dose, and what timing of delivery that woman needs. So, what is astounding to me is the bar that we set for a response to HRT. Because anytime a woman introduces, say, an SSRI, an antidepressant, and she says, I know for the next 6 weeks, I'm probably not going to feel right. I know there's going to be side effects. We just accept that, right? But when it comes to a hormone, we're like, oh my gosh, I don't really feel right. That's awful. I'm intolerant. And it's like, why have we set this bar for not
it's
having side
fear.
effects to
Hmm.
introducing it, right? So I say to my women, anytime you put a medication, a hormone, a supplement, make a lifestyle change, you're taking a risk because I do not know, and you will never know how you're going to respond as an individual. So that is a part of it. But if you choose that path, it's going to take time because, as you said, the three main types are vaginal, oral, and transdermal. Okay, so the common one to get on prescription is oral. And I tend to see this, and everything I share is for most women. This is what we see from most women. There'll always be individual nuance in this. But taking it orally, I think is great for sleep. Okay, it's going to protect your womb, but it reduces the allopregnanolone. And this is because we take it orally, and in that upper GI tract, in the liver, it's broken down very quickly into allopregnanolone. Only about 10 to 30% actually stays as progesterone. So you get this allo, which is so calming, a bit sedating for the nervous system. So really supportive for sleep time, taking it at night. Some women don't like that sensation. They don't get on with that the higher percentage of allo. So therefore, vaginal progesterone can be great. I mean, I love vaginal progesterone for supporting with things like estrogen-driven conditions like adenomyosis, fibroids, polyps. If I'm seeing these things, I'm like heavy bleeds, clotty bleeds, painful bleeds. That progesterone, vaginal progesterone, is all there, and it bypasses that initial breakdown into allo and all progesterones. It goes into that uterus, it's at the site, really supporting the number of women I see in clinic who've been told I have to have a hysterectomy. I'm like, well, let's try you on 2 cycles of a good dose of progesterone. And I'm yet to have one where that hasn't given them a normal period. Okay, like why are we whipping women's wombs out when you can have some vaginal progesterone and it's got very high risk, high chance of success. So that's why I like the vaginal. But for women who don't get on with it orally, it can be really supportive for mood as well. I don't see it being so great for most women for sleep, but just the fact that it can support mood. Usually I see that at higher doses. That can help with sleep as a byproduct. And then we have the transdermal, which obviously you're super familiar with because of working with Dr. Platt. And what I love about this is it's an in the moment instant tool for mood regulation. So, there's lots of
Within
debate
10
about how,
minutes. Yeah.
put him.
Within 10
Yeah.
minutes, you feel the
Oh,
difference.
instant. And that's coming in. It's on that receptor. It's blocking those stress hormones. I had, just myself over Christmas, I was getting quite anxious about something. I could feel my heart going, hands palpitating, put a first layer of cream on and didn't touch the sides. I did it again 15 minutes later, boom, all of that went. It's an incredible tool to have for most women. And so for me, it's about saying, well, what's the perfect type and mixture for you? And that's the dosing dance is going into meeting that edge. How do I get on with this one? And I might suddenly start on 300 orally and go, oh my gosh, it's changed my life. That's how I feel so much better. But someone like me, it took 18 months to optimize. I got to a stable dose within a few months, but optimizing it where I genuinely feel, I think the best I ever have, considering I have ADHD. I was always told I was anxious. I'm not an anxious person. I've just got a highly sensitive nervous system, right? I am genetically hardwired to not sleep. I'm very estrogenic. I need a lot of progesterone in my body for my body to go, oh, we're here. So that for me looks like vaginal, oral, and cream. Everyone will be different, and you have to take the time to get there. It doesn't just happen. And again, because of the lack of accessibility to proper prescribers or support, you've got women out there raw dogging it. Like seeing things going, right, I'm just going to see what happens when I start increasing my dose, which that would totally be me, getting curious with it. But then, of course, it can backfire, right? And then they can just end up in a bit of a pickle, like, I don't know what I'm doing now. So I think we're moving in the right direction within our world. I don't think medically we're anywhere near where we need to be. But within our world, women are becoming a lot more informed and being able to get curious with the right dosing and types for them. And that's really important.
With the vaginal not estrogen, progesterone, are you seeing women primarily using the cream vaginally? I know some women will freeze the cream and make their own little kind of insertion, or some women actually will take the oral bioidentical progesterone and just push that up insert.
There's all kinds of experimentation. I've got people who pop the oral progesterone and use it on their skin when they're like, they need it. There's a lot of different playing with progesterone that happens. I do see in spaces that the cream gets frozen and used in that way, but I don't tend to see that in my community. I think there's too many steps involved for ADHD people to be bothered about being able to do all of that. So we tend to prescribe the pessaries is what we tend to give our women.
Yeah, with desperate times call for desperate measures, and women will
Absolutely.
do what they have to do when things get bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no wonder, and I think there's a really amazing righteous rage that is happening at the moment of women saying, you would take my womb out. And this is what I needed. I have suffered all of my adult life with periods, and this is what I needed. You
Mhm.
know, good. You should be angry.
That is not me. I still have my uterus, although I was offered one when I was 31, a hysterectomy due to abnormal paps. And I was like, I literally said, are you crazy? Like, what is wrong with you offering me that? But imagine being one of these women who has had a hysterectomy only to realize it could have been
Mm,
prevented.
yes.
Like, I wouldn't just be angry. I don't know what I'd do. You just feel so hard done by,
Mm,
betrayed, let
mm,
down, robbed, as we say in
yeah.
Ireland, and like someone robbed your body
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. Absolutely. And and then continue to deny you progesterone because you've had a hysterectomy, and we'll keep putting estrogen in your body unopposed.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's a mess.
I hear that all the time. They will not prescribe, but at least in Canada, they will not prescribe because you've had a hysterectomy. But we will give you
Yes.
estrogen, but sorry,
Yeah.
we can't give you progesterone because you don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. They're not trained in understanding what progesterone does. That's not okay.
Yeah, no, it's not. And back to what I was saying, it then becomes so hard for us in our practices to almost convince women to just give this a try and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Because there is still a big element of trust in conventional medicine. Not that I'm against that, but I'm slightly surprised that it's still
Yeah, I
there.
am.
But
Yeah.
it just it it can be discouraging. Not that we'll stop what we're doing, but I
Mm,
would hope that people see, like the listeners, the audience sees and hears that practitioners like us, we just want to help you get the truth. We want to, and at
yeah.
least give you a different voice. And then you
Mm.
can make your own decision what you want to do. And you don't have to feel stuck.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to know there are choices. If no one else has told you this before, suddenly you've got choices when you might have been told your only choice is to have your womb removed or to have a coil, that you'd go going, your body wisdom is going, I don't really, that doesn't feel right. And so to go, well, actually, you could try this if you want to. It's like, oh, wow, I've got options, you know? And I think so much of my work, and I'm sure yours, is validating a woman's experience. You know, she's been
Mhm.
told time and again, your labs are normal, nothing's wrong. And you sit down and go, no, this is what is happening. And you just see the body go, oh, it's not in my head. And this is what we can do about it. Right?
Mm.
That's powerful. That's healing.
Yeah. So if you are feeling anxiety, overwhelm, these different symptoms of ADHD, what we're saying is that maybe we should approach it from a hormonal approach first before doing anything too drastic. We're not totally wiping off the idea that it's ADHD, but let's definitely look at the hormones because come on, we're in midlife, we're in perimenopause. It would be irresponsible and naive to not look at the hormones.
Mm, mm. Absolutely. And I've got one psychiatrist that I work with in the UK that if he is assessing a woman, he will say, look, go and get your hormones right, and then we'll medicate you. Because what you don't want to do is start using these strong ADHD medications to treat a hormone imbalance. And obviously, you want to have a hormone imbalance and use ADHD meds. You know, you want to be able to treat the right thing with the right product, if you like. You don't want to be trying to. And ADHD medication is very good at masking hormone symptoms. If there are hormone imbalances there, you may not feel them because the stimulant medication, the ADHD medication, will mask it. But
Mhm.
those hormone imbalances will still be there.
Yeah, just like antidepressants, they'll numb your hormones. But, and so you've got this doctor that's saying before we look at ADHD, let's take a step back and look at hormones and see if we can make you feel better doing that first. But I would
Mm,
say, and you've already mentioned, let's take another step even further back and let's just look at the diet and lifestyle first and see what difference we can make there. Then
mm,
the hormones, and then if all else
mm,
fails, then the ADHD. Because I
mm,
really, as much as you, I'm a huge fan of bioidentical hormone therapy.
mm,
But with the conversation now, the last year or so, women have jumped over this step of
mm,
no, you still have to optimize your nutrition, sleep,
mm,
lifestyle, get your blood sugars.
mm.
Now we're just forget about that. Hormones are going to fix everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I say it's not the golden ticket. If you are living a lifestyle where you're not eating, you're living off of caffeine, you're on your phone doom scrolling, you're not sleeping properly, your body's not going to be able to process the hormones properly anyway. You know, you have to get this right. And I think for lots of women, they get stuck in this like chicken or egg situation. Like, I know what I need to do for my health, but I just don't have the capacity to do it. You know, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe look at HRT first in that situation to see if it helps to give you the bandwidth. But if you're taking the HRT and you're not noticing a lot of shifts, why? You know, is it a hormone deficiency at all, or is it your blood sugar?
Mhm.
Is it disrupted circadian rhythm? Is it depleted adrenals, dysregulated adrenal function? You know, let's have a look at
Or do
what is
you
going
just
on in
have
your
a
body.
lot of inflammation and those inflammatory
Yeah,
byproducts because you're eating terrible and you're drinking too much
yeah,
alcohol?
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Adele, where can people find you?
So, as you know, I love to hang out on Instagram. I've just opened up a free school community, so SKOOL, which is specifically around educating people around ADHD and hormones. So this month we've done all about PMDD. Next month we're doing about RSD, rejection sensitivity, and then you've got my website where you've got a course you can just work your way through. Come work with me in clinic, whatever your route is that feels good to you. We've got free platforms. We've got one-to-one clinics, got online programs, whatever you feel is right. There hopefully will be something for you. Free resources on my website. Just go and have a little mooch around. See what you
A little
fancy.
mooch. I don't think they use that term too much in Canada and the US, but there's a lot of terms they don't use here. So it's always refreshing to me to speak to someone like in Ireland or England and be like, yeah, I know what you mean, but
No
nobody
way.
else
No one else.
does. Well,
Ah,
thank you for your time. This was
pleasure.
excellent, brilliant. I think this is going to be very well received. Obviously, very important topic. You've got your experience in the UK. I'm in Canada and I see what's happening and it's sinful. So hopefully this really helps women.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.